Good morning, Europe. Welcome to the program. Our top stories for you this hour. Found alive. 12 boys and their coach are found alive after 9 days in a Thailand cave. But how will rescuers now get them out? Plus, over in the Cube, our social media news desk.
It's a global rescue effort. We'll be taking you into the details and the challenges those rescuers face to free the boys.
Policy U-turn. Angela Merkel agrees to build border camps for asylum seekers in a dramatic deal to save her government. Manhunt underway. All hands on deck in a massive search for the notorious gangster who broke out of a French prison. And Belgium are through to the World Cup quarterfinals after a stunning comeback against Japan. Thank you for starting your day with us on Good Morning Europe. Our top story, there was euphoria as they were found alive. The 12 boys and their football captain missing in a Thai cave network for 9 days were discovered by rescue divers. And the moment was caught on camera, but their ordeal is far from over. Weak and sensitive to light, their safe escape could now depend on them learning to dive. And it could take weeks or even months for them to be rescued. Evelyn Laverick has the story.
How many of you? 13. Brilliant.
The first contact with 12 boys and their coach missing in caves in Thailand for 9 days. The remarkable video was shot by rescuers who found them perched on a ledge beside a pool of deep water.
Many people are coming.
The youngsters, aged between 11 and 16, and their 25-year-old coach had set out to explore the cave complex after football practice on June the 23rd. A boy left behind raised the alarm when they didn't return. Families of the missing group were ecstatic at news of the rescue. One woman said, "Today is the best day. I've been waiting for my son for so many days. I thought he only had a 50% chance of survival. I'm so excited. The first thing I'll do is hug him." But now the challenge is to get the boys out of the cave. Rescuers have battled through thick mud and high water to reach the group. One option is to bring them out by diving. It's the quickest, but it's also the most dangerous. The other is to wait and use pumps to reduce water levels. But that's a race against time as more monsoon rain is forecast. Meanwhile, medical teams have been sent inside with energy gels and fresh water while they can assess how fit the boys are before coming up with a strategy. Evelyn Laverick, Euronews.
Now, in a moment, we will be speaking to the U.S. Air Force at the cave site. But first, you're looking at live pictures from the scene where rescuers are now working out how to get the boys and their coach out of the cave. And I am joined now by U.S. Air Force spokesperson Jessica Tate, who has been helping with the rescue efforts. Jessica, good to see you there. It's been an incredible journey. I mean, we've been following this for a couple of days. Can you give us a sense of how it happened and how difficult it was, considering you were there?
So we've been following the developments closely, and we are thrilled with such a positive outcome that the children and the coach are alive. This was a Thai-led multinational rescue effort. We've been here since the 28th of June, and since we've hit the ground, we've been working with our Thai partners. It truly is amazing when you see all the people that are here supporting this effort. I just have no words for it.
And in terms of the equipment used, the kind of skills needed to get into the cave, can you describe to us what that was like?
So the Royal Thai government requested the United States through U.S. Indo-Pacific Command to send U.S. Air Force forces in. So my team is comprised of pararescuemen, a survival specialist, as well as support personnel. And since we've hit the ground, we've been advising and assisting the Thais with this effort. Our skill set is very specialized, and where we're able to provide, whether it's helping support dive operations or surveying the land, trying to find alternate entry points, or whether it's providing that medical care, the team is here, they're working hard and really integrating with our Thai partners. You know, the United States and Thailand have been partners for a long time, and it's just wonderful that we're here to celebrate.
Yeah, and Jessica, I think one of the main issues in this rescue was the lack of skills, the skill set needed in order to get into that cave, and that's why you were there helping the Thai authorities. Can you tell us what is ahead for the people in the cave still, mentally and physically, in terms of getting out of the cave?
Well, I'd say there's definitely some challenges ahead, but what's so wonderful is that you have everyone here that has been working, the rescue workers, from the Thai authorities to the Thai government to the international presence here. So yes, here U.S., but then you also have Australian divers, you have Chinese divers, the British dive team that found the boys, all here and supporting this. The challenges ahead, its next phase is the planning. It's trying to figure out what's the best course of action to be able to get these boys and the coach out quickly, but the paramount thing is safely.
And the parents have set up a tribute site, I think, in front of the cave. What is the situation there like right now?
I feel that everyone is just, waiting for what's next. And it really is the planning. There's a lot of joy and sense in the air. I think I was here last night and it was unreal, really, truthfully. Everyone just being so happy that we found them and that they were alive and that we were able to now get into providing assistance and then looking at that next phase of the operation and being able to extract them.
All right. Thank you for that. Jessica Tate from the U.S. Air Force, who is right there at the rescue site. Thank you. Well, despite the group of 13 having been found alive, there are a lot more challenges ahead for them. Alex in the Cube has this part of the story. Alex.
Tessa, what an extraordinary twist to hear that news yesterday. They were found alive and well. But as Tessa was saying there, the challenges are still ahead to rescue this team. Let's just take a look at the cave system where the boys have been found. This is an overview of the mountain. This yellow line showing the cave system. The entrance here, where the boys would have entered. And this area here, Pattaya Beach, is where the rescue workers believed they would have sought sanctuary from the rising waters of the monsoon. They were actually found 400 metres further up, roughly around here. That is where the boys were eventually found by a British dive team. So, as you can see, to get them back to the entrance is a significant distance. And a local organisation which specialises in underwater diving did a quick sketch last night and shared it on social media, just showing how difficult it would be just to get them back to Pattaya Beach, where they originally thought they were. Let's just walk you through this very quickly. These areas here, so this is where the boys have been found. These areas here are submerged. The boys would have to dive through at least 10 metres of water at each point. Then there's an area here where scuba gear has to be taken off because of the narrowness of the passage. The narrow passage here, meaning the gear has to come off your shoulders. Then there is a steep slope up here where you had to carry your scuba gear to reach the top where the SEAL rescue team are based. And then from there, you still have to make it through further water to Pattaya Beach. Now, it's reported that many of these boys can't swim, let alone dive. So this challenge for professional divers, you can see how risky and how dangerous this would be. There's also a suggestion of drilling from the surface, but again, it's been reported that actually to get the heavy drilling equipment up there to try and reach the boys, you've got to build the roads, bring the drills up, and this is a race against time with more monsoon rains forecast for the future. But on social media, irrespective of the challenges, people have seized on that, the hope for getting the boys out, having now found them alive. And this is the image we want to leave you with. It's the word thank you, written in several languages, and it's been shared on social media in both Thai and English, basically thanking the rescue workers and now having a really positive view of the future. People hopeful that now they found them, these rescue workers can get the boys out. Tessa.
All right, thank you for that, Alex. And coming up in about 20 minutes, we will have more on this story. We'll be talking to a cave rescue expert on that. Now, it's a dramatic change of heart for German Chancellor Angela Merkel. She's just agreed to tighten Germany's borders to try and save her government under growing pressure from the right. For weeks, a row over migration policy threatened to topple her fragile coalition, but hours of talks with her hardline Interior Minister Horst Seehofer led him to drop his threat to resign. Under the deal, migrants who have already applied for asylum in other EU countries will be held in transit centers on the border with Austria, while Germany negotiates bilateral deals for their return. Merkel says she's satisfied with the agreement because it allows Germany to stick to EU rules on freedom of movement.
This preserves the very spirit of partnership in the European Union, while at the same time taking a decisive step towards organizing and managing secondary migration. That's exactly what was and is important to me. And that's why I believe that today, after a difficult struggle, we have found a really good compromise.
Well, let's head live to Berlin now for more from our correspondent Jessica Saltz. Jessica, we know that Merkel, she staked her reputation, her leadership on welcoming migrants, but now she's making a U-turn. Is this a win for Seehofer?
Well, of course, Angela Merkel praised the outcome of yesterday's talks with Seehofer, but she has kept Seehofer in government, one of her toughest critics. So it does seem like she is desperate not to let the government fall apart at this stage. And we know that an absolute red line for Angela Merkel was Bavaria acting unilaterally and turning migrants away from the border there. But many is pointing to the fact that these new transit centres, which she agreed on last night with Seehofer, which will be down within Bavaria, within the German border, on the border of Austria, will act in a similar fashion. They will process asylum seekers coming into Germany and ultimately send them back to other EU countries where their asylum was approved, or deport them back to their original country of origin. So really, it was a bit of a fudge, I think, is how it's being interpreted. And the fact that these transit centres will be down in Bavaria, nowhere else on Germany's borders as yet, really just goes to show that this was really an issue of regional politics. Seehofer under a lot of pressure from the CSU party down in Bavaria to come to a conclusion on migration, because migration really isn't a crisis at the moment. In fact, these transit centres, it's predicted, will only be dealing with a small handful of migrants every week. This is more of a political crisis, and the question is, has Angela Merkel fixed this political crisis, or has she just papered over the cracks?
Indeed, that is the question, because before she can start celebrating, in fact, she has to get the backing of her other partners, the SPD, the Socialist Party. Can she secure that deal?
Well, yeah, of course, it's quite easy to forget that there is another party in the German government, the Social Democrats, because we've just heard the Conservatives bickering for such a long time. But the Social Democrats will be meeting with the Conservatives tonight to discuss this deal. Now, the Social Democrats broadly support a lot of Merkel's ideas on migration, but they have been critical of the idea of transit centres for quite a long time. Now, will they kick up enough of a fuss about this in negotiations tonight in order to block this deal that Merkel and Seehofer have agreed? This remains to be seen. Certainly, Andrea Nahles, the head of the Social Democrats, is aware that that nobody wants to see new elections coming, not least the Social Democrats, who are polling at historic lows in opinion polls. And really, the public opinion in Germany is very much that they want to see this public dispute in the political sphere about migration finished with. So really, there's quite a lot of hope that the Social Democrats will be on side tonight, but of course, by no means this is a done deal yet.
All right, thank you for that. Jessica Saltz, who's following the political drama in Germany. Thanks. Now, thousands of police officers are continuing a manhunt for the convict who dramatically escaped from a French prison. The charred remains of a helicopter which picked up Redouane Faïd from within the prison grounds have been taken for investigation. He had been serving a 25-year sentence for armed robbery and murder and had escaped prison before. Now, there are now questions about whether drones were used to help him.
He was transferred for judicial reasons. Whilst he was away, there were no drones. When he came back, the drones returned. This would imply that the drones were there for him.
And joining me now by Skype from Belfast is the former governor and director from the Northern Ireland Prison Service, Max Murray. Thank you very much, Max, for joining us today. This must have been a pretty sophisticated escape. How much help do you think Faïd would have had to pull this off?
Well, there's no question this was a well-planned, well-organised, well-resourced and very well-executed escape. And there's, without doubt, he would have had sufficient funding to be able to support the escape, but also he would have had quite significant support from other fellow criminals.
All right. And, you know, this is not the first time that he's done it before. Probably he did get a lot of support. What kind of precautions should have been, perhaps, in place, knowing that he's tried this before?
One would, whenever a person is committed to prison, one of the first things that is done is a security risk assessment, and that would look at the individual's criminal history, look at the nature of the recent offending, look at the propensity to violence and harm. It would look at his ability to plan an escape, and more particularly look at the level of danger that that individual would present to the public if he were to escape. In this instance, I would be amazed if this person was not assessed as top security. The previous escape was in 2013. It's not that long ago. And he should have been under a security regime that ensured that there was maximum physical security, maximum procedure security, and staff who were looking after him were trained to look out for issues around conditioning, issues around preventing the person from planning any escape like this. So that would include monitoring visits, monitoring phone calls. So you would expect there would be a significant infrastructure, security infrastructure, that this individual would be subject to.
Indeed, you talk about risk assessment, looking at what is around, what could potentially help an escape like this. And now we have the presence of drones. I mean, this probably should be factored into risk assessment, shouldn't it?
Well, there's no question about that. I mean, drones are now a problem in many, many jurisdictions. A lot of contraband is trafficked into prisons now using drones, where drones will drop drugs into prisons. Drones will also use to film and photograph flying over prisons. So drones are not unusual. There are two major weaknesses now that prisons have to combat. One is drones, but the other is accessibility to mobile phones. So no question that this person would have had a mobile phone. He would have had immediate communication with those people who were helping him on the outside, and he would be able to plan virtually without any interruption or without any real problems.
All right. Thank you for your insight there. Max Murray, the former governor and director from the Northern Ireland Prison Service. Thanks.
Thank you.
And still to come for you on Good Morning Europe, alive but still trapped. We speak to a cave diver to find out how the children trapped in a Thai cave will be rescued. And Mexico's newly elected president and Donald Trump discuss the border wall. Well, President Trump says he thinks Mexico will help. All that after a short break. You're watching Good Morning Europe. An unbelievable rescue as the 12 boys and their coach are found alive in a Thai cave network. Well, the group have been stuck in the cave for 10 days now, and the rescue operation is far from over. Their safe escape may depend on them learning to dive and swim to safety from the flooded network of tunnels. Now, what next for relations between Mexico and the United States? So far, so good, following Sunday's landslide election victory for Andrés Manuel López Obrador, despite massive differences between the two countries over migration and trade. Mexico's next president held a half-hour phone call with Donald Trump yesterday, and afterwards, Trump talked up the prospect of making progress.
I think he's going to try and help us with border. We have unbelievably bad border laws, immigration laws, the weakest in the world, laughed at by everybody in the world. And Mexico has very strong immigration laws, so they can help us until we straighten out our immigration laws, which have been bad for many, many years, decades.
López Obrador, the former mayor of Mexico City, will take office in December, becoming the country's first leftist leader for decades. Well, I'm joined now by your news correspondent, Alistair Sanford. Alistair, they had a war of words while he was still campaigning, but now it seems they've both struck a conciliatory tone. Is this our starting point?
For now, it seems to be very positive, but of course it's very early days. Yes, remember Trump's antagonistic rhetoric towards Mexico and Mexicans, and López Obrador also pretty outspoken, very critical of Trump during his campaign. All that changed after the election victory on Sunday. Trump tweeting his congratulations very quickly, saying they can work together on both interests on both sides. Obrador saying he wants friendly relations with the US. They've now held this phone call. When you get down to the detail, though, it seems there is scope for problems ahead. For instance, on trade, Trump said after the meeting, after their phone call, that he thought they could work towards a possible trade deal. But the reality is the US is heading towards a trade war. It's slammed tariffs on aluminium and steel products. Mexico's retaliated. Mexico is talking about something completely different. Now, Obrador's advisors have been talking, and they're saying they're willing to push back against what they call protectionist measures from the US and raise tariffs. But above all, they do want to save NAFTA, the free trade agreement that Trump says he wants to renegotiate and says is so unfair. Mexico, they say they want to try to convince him that China's the issue and it's not really Mexican exports and jobs.
And of course, Alistair, when we talk about the United States and Mexico, what comes to mind really is the border wall, in fact. Have they discussed this, or is there any way forward on this issue?
I don't know if they've discussed the border wall in particular. Imagine they did. They didn't really give much detail afterwards, but it seems they're certainly not on the same page on this. I mean, Trump is talking border and security. Obrador is talking about tackling the causes of migration. Now, we heard what Donald Trump says there is backed up by one of his advisors, Kellyanne Conway, who's gone on TV to say, remember that Trump's policy is about not just the wall, but getting Mexico to pay for it. That's still very much on the table. Obrador is talking about development and jobs. During the campaign, he put forward a plan to cut illegal immigration by tackling the causes of it. He even referred to a JFK plan from the 1960s to help Central America. Well, is Trump really likely to help Mexico develop a program to create Mexican jobs? That's hard to imagine. And remember, it's not just about the border. There's also the thorny issue of family separations. Lots of families divided across the border. And, of course, many undocumented migrants held in detention at the moment. So a lot of work to do.
And a lot of thorny issues there, indeed. Thank you for that, Alistair Sanford. Thanks. Now, French President Emmanuel Macron is arriving in Nigeria today, where security in Africa will be high on the agenda. His visit to Mauritania yesterday was overshadowed by the deaths of 4 French soldiers in Mali at the weekend. An al-Qaeda-linked Islamist group has claimed responsibility for that attack. Demonstrators over water shortages in Iran have turned violent as security forces tackled protesters. Fire and debris littered the streets in the southern city of Khorramshahr as Iranians took to the streets amid a year-long drought. Protesters threw stones and other objects after police used tear gas to diminish the crowd. One person was wounded. An Australian archbishop has been sentenced for concealing child sexual abuse in the 1970s. Philip Wilson, Archbishop of Adelaide, is the most senior Catholic cleric in the world to be convicted of the crime. The 67-year-old is being assessed for suitability for home detention, meaning he may not serve prison time. And still to come for you on Good Morning Europe. More on our top story. How will the 12 boys and their football captain now get out of the cave? We'll ask an expert. And from theCUBE.
We have the latest as the Maltese authorities detain a second NGO migrant rescue ship. That's after a short break.
You're watching Good Morning Europe. Welcome back to the program. Now, for the second time in a week, Malta has detained an NGO ship which said it will continue rescuing migrants in the Mediterranean. Alex has more on this story.
Morning, Tesa. Yes, the ongoing political row about who should be responsible for saving lives at sea. Well, for Malta, it's been a very divisive issue. And there's now a second vessel that claims it's being detained in the country and unable to get back out to rescuing. And that is this vessel, operated by a German charity. It's called Sea-Watch, this vessel Sea-Watch 3. They say they requested permission to leave port after undergoing maintenance and were denied by the Maltese port authorities. Now, they claim this is nothing to do with registration or maintenance issues, but part of a political campaign by Maltese authorities against civil rescue at sea. And they say here, while we are hindered from leaving port, people are drowning. Any further death at sea is on the account of those preventing rescue. So very strong stance here. Now, Malta as well has taken legal action against the captain of another NGO vessel. You remember Mission Lifeline, this vessel we reported on last week, finally arrived, over 230 people on board. Well, the Maltese had long maintained that this vessel broke international rules. Macron, French president, said as well, as did the Italians. So now the Maltese are taking legal action. And this is the scene as the captain of that vessel arrived in court yesterday. Now, he and the charity denied any wrongdoing, and he's now been released on bail. But it does go to show just how divisive an issue this is, both politically and socially across Europe. Now, with a second vessel unable to leave Malta, we'll be keeping across developments as this story undoubtedly is going to continue. And we know that actually out in the Mediterranean, the death toll this year alone has passed 1,000 people now drowning trying to make the crossing to Europe. But who should help them? That is a divisive question for Europe, and there are different views. David here, for example, says that NGOs picking up migrants in the Mediterranean aren't helping, they're not saving lives, they're adding to the death toll by encouraging people to make this crossing. But then other people have the opposite view altogether, saying that the EU is effectively losing its humanity in taking a stern stance on NGOs and people volunteering to be out there in these conditions rescuing people. So it's a divisive issue. There are a lot of views, and we want to hear from you too. All voices here on Euronews. You can let us know your thoughts using #TheCube.
All right, thank you for that, Alex and the Cube team. Now, the devil is in the detail. European leaders are attempting to flesh out the migration deal struck at last week's Brussels summit. And one sticking point that's emerged is a different law that applies to migrants picked up in international waters and those found in coastal waters. Well, I'm joined now by Euronews correspondent Brian Carter. Brian, can you tell us what exactly is this debate about?
Well, Tessa, there's still a lot of discussions following the conclusions of the summit that was held here on Thursday and Friday, especially regarding the cooperation with Libya and Libyan authorities, with many saying that this posed a greater risk for refugees of being detained in Libya under the current conditions, which the United Nations have called an outrage to humanity. But one sentence in the conclusion was also focused a lot of the attention. This sentence in the third paragraph reads that all vessels operating in the Mediterranean must respect the applicable laws and not obstruct operations of the Libyan Coast Guard. So it seems to infer greater power for Libyan Coast Guards and Libyan authorities, and that search and rescue operations by EU vessels could face legal challenges. Now, NGOs were quick to react, saying that this posed a greater threat to their independence and their work. Euronews yesterday spoke with an expert on the role of non-state actors in humanitarian situations, and here's what he had to say about this sentence.
The sentence sends a political message, which is that the European Union stands behind Italy in their willingness to regulate, if not straitjacket, the activities of NGOs offshore Libya. What the sentence means from a legal standpoint is more obscure, because one of the key principles of international maritime law is the notion of freedom of navigation. There is nothing that prevents any vessel from conducting a search and rescue operation in international waters, if so they wish.
Indeed, you heard it. So it's actually mandatory for vessels to help people that have been stranded at sea and bring them to a safe place. Nothing in international law can prevent that. But countries also have the responsibility to find a safe place for people that have been saved. And Libya is not considered to be a safe place. So if the rescue operation happens in international waters, vessels cannot go back to Libya and disembark the migrants there, even if the rescue operation is coordinated by Libya, unless, of course, it's a Libyan ship. And that point was clearly explained yesterday by the European Commission during a press conference.
If it's Libya coordinating a search and rescue operation in the sea, all vessels must respect the orders of the Rescue Coordination Center of Libya. The Libyan authorities and the Libyan Coast Guard have all the rights to come back to Libya to disembark.
So indeed, the best hope for migrants is to reach international waters, which is set at 12 nautical miles from the coast, about 22 kilometers. You heard it from Alex. A lot of people say that this creates a pull factor for migrants, but there's actually no statistical evidence to prove that. On the other hand, some studies seem to indicate that indeed the fact that there are search and rescue operations pushes smugglers to take greater risks with the lives of migrants. Tessa?
All right, thank you for that, Brian Carter in Brussels. And coming up, we will have all of your top stories for you, including that incredible story of the 12 boys and their football coach who were found alive after 9 days in a Thai cave. We will be speaking to a cave rescue expert. And in Germany, Angela Merkel makes a U-turn on her migrant policy to save her government. We will have a look at a new border police force in Bavaria. And an amazing, stunning comeback at the World Cup. We'll have all the details for you. But first, let's have a look at today's no comment from California. It's an incredible story as well. It's probably something you'll never see again. A bear, a wild bear, in a hot tub. You're watching Good Morning Europe. Our top story, found alive. 12 boys and their coach are finally discovered after 9 days in a Thai cave. But how will rescuers now get them out? Angela Merkel makes a U-turn on her policy on migration. She agrees to build border camps for asylum seekers in a dramatic deal to save her government. And Belgium are through to the World Cup quarterfinals after a stunning comeback against Japan. Euphoria rippled around Chiang Rai as 12 boys and their football coach were found alive after more than 9 days trapped underground. But their ordeal is far from over. Weak and sensitive to light, their safe escape could now depend on them learning to dive. If forced to wait for floodwaters to recede, their rescue could be weeks or even months in the making. Well, rescue divers found the group huddled on a ridge in a Thai cave network, and the moment was caught on camera, as you can see on your screen.
Thank you. How many of you? 13. Brilliant. We are coming. It's okay. It's okay. Many people are coming. Many people. We are the first. Many people come. What day? Tomorrow. No. What day is it? No, Monday. Okay, but 1 week and Monday. You have been here 10 days. 10 days. You are very strong. Very strong.
I am really happy.
We are happy too.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Well, for more on what to expect on the rescue operation, I'm joined by a technical cave diver, Ed Sorensen. Ed, good to see you there. More heavy rains are expected, and the Thai authorities have proposed different options. In your experience, what are the most viable options for the rescue?
Well, it's really hard to say since I'm here and I'm not there on scene. But a lot of factors come into play. How long a distance do they need to go in a completely submerged cave to get them out? If it's a short distance, it's plausible to get them out in scuba. That becomes very risky, very dangerous for untrained personnel in a zero visibility, high flow system like that. So, taking them in all their medical supplies, food, water, things to keep them warm, and waiting it out is obviously the safest and the most plausible. Getting them out in scuba with no training it becomes very risky, very dangerous.
So from your experience, you think that keeping them there and waiting for the waters to recede, so just giving them food and medical care inside the cave is the best option, but that could take months.
Well, yeah, time is always a factor. At least they have hope now. They're incredibly strong to have survived this long. They didn't seem to be panicked. They didn't seem to be just polite and courteous and very good mannered. So, it's something that could possibly happen. But usually when you take somebody especially somebody not trained, into a zero visibility situation, especially for a long period. In high flow, stress and panic become a real factor.
Yeah, and you have been involved in some rescue operations in the past. What advice, if you will, could you give to them who would be dealing with this from inside the cave?
Well, I can't really give advice just for the fact that I'm not there. If I was on one of the divers that had gone in there, then I'd know these because there's so many factors that come into play. So, if it's a short distance and it's big, wide open cave, but it's zero visibility. And anytime you take an untrained person, even a trained person in zero visibility, high flow, high stress, it can turn to panic real quick.
Indeed. Thank you for that. Given all those difficult factors, it's really an incredible story that they've been found alive. Thank you, Ed Sorensen, a technical cave diver. Thank you there. Now, in Germany, Chancellor Angela Merkel and her Interior Minister Horst Seehofer have finally reached a compromise over migration policy in an attempt to solve a dispute that threatened to topple her coalition government. Seehofer's home state of Bavaria has already moved to tighten controls at the border with Austria. Louise Miner and Hans von der Breyle report.
In the middle of the current EU dispute over the refugee policy between the sister parties CSU and CDU, the newly created border police in the federal state of Bavaria has started its work. It comes as the CSU emphasised that the timing was coincidental, as the event had been planned for months. The new border police will work with the federal police to secure the boundary.
We're convinced we need improved security at our borders. We also believe that we still have to gain ground. We've always seen that what's been decided in Europe is an important step, but that it will take a very long time. And we've noticed over the last few days that there are uncertainties about which countries are participating and which are not. I believe that real action in Germany is simply imperative to strengthen European interests.
With state-of-the-art equipment, the new border police will be able to compare data of asylum seekers, which should prevent people applying for asylum in several different EU countries. Louise Miner, Euronews.
Now, Britain's Home Office has set immigrants up to fail, and it must undergo total reform. Those are the damning findings from a cross-party group of MPs looking into the government's treatment of the so-called Windrush generation of immigrants from the Caribbean. Our correspondent Vincent McAviney has been following it for us from London. Vincent, you've seen this report. What are your key takeaways?
Good morning, Tessa. Well, you may remember about 6 weeks ago, as you're saying, all anyone was talking about here at Parliament was the Windrush scandal. It led to a national outcry and even the resignation of the British Home Secretary, Amber Rudd. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, the Windrush were a generation from the Caribbean invited to the UK in the post-war years to help rebuild the country. They were given British citizenship and lived here happily since. But then they began to be targeted by immigration services. Thousands of them had their residencies questioned. Some of them even lost their homes, their jobs, their healthcare. A number were detained and even sent back to countries in the Caribbean that they hadn't been to in around 50 years. Well, an influential group of MPs on the Home Affairs Select Committee is publishing a report today on this scandal. It is very critical of the British government and the treatment that these people had to endure. And it says that the UK's immigration system needs a root and branch reform. It said that enforcement targets led to a focus on people like the Windrush generation who may have been easier to detain and remove. Now, this report says that the hostile environment created by the then Home Secretary Theresa May had much to do with this. The Prime Minister has apologised. Sajid Javid, the new Home Secretary, said this was his first priority. There may be a hardship fund, the report says, that needs to be set up for these people. But it raises serious questions. If a group this size, some tens of thousands, these levels of mistakes can be made, then what is the Home Office going to do when it needs to process the millions of EU citizens that it needs to sort out during the Brexit?
All right, thank you for that. Vincent McAviney there in London. And still to come for you, and Good Morning Europe will give you all the latest on the World Cup, including a spectacular comeback. And over in the Cube.
In case you missed it, the moment the Dutch PM said no to Donald Trump. But first, let's take a short break.
A quick recap of our top story. An unbelievable rescue as the 12 boys and their coach are found alive in a Thai cave network. The group have been stuck in the cave for 10 days now, and the rescue operation is far from over. Their safe escape may depend on them learning to dive and swim to safety in the flooded network of tunnels. To World Cup news now. Belgium have become the first team since 1970 to come from 2 goals down to win after they beat Japan 3-2 yesterday. Well, these fans that you can see in Grimbergen, Belgium, cheered with delight as their team beat out the Japanese team. Some spectators were less happy, of course. Disappointment spread elsewhere as Denmark lost out to Croatia in penalty shootouts. And here in the studio with me to give us all the lowdown on what's going on is your news sports correspondent, Andy Rubini. Andy, that was a dramatic comeback. It was 0-2 to Japan, and then they won. Tell us about that.
It was such a superb game. This World Cup in Russia just keeps on giving. 3-2 was the final result for Belgium, who defeated Japan. We have to give credit to this Japanese side. They fought so hard, were very brave throughout the game. And to illustrate this point, usually Belgium play in a 3-5-2 formation. Yesterday, they had to revert to a 5-3-2 formation, which is less attacking minded. It basically meant that their fullbacks were pushed behind due to the constant pressure from the Japanese side. Japan scored 2 goals in the space of 4 minutes, which is absolutely incredible. But then Belgium reacted and bounced back and were able to find the solutions, eventually overturning this deficit thanks to goals from 2 subs. So we have to say that the coaching was very good from Martinez, bringing on Chadli and Fellaini in the 65th minute. Both of them got on the score sheet. First of all, Fellaini with a towering header, like he knows how to do. And then Chadli scored in the dying minutes, thanks to a beautiful counter-attack from Belgium.
Yeah, it's great to watch because Japan was seen as a very strong team. And indeed, as you said, they just had to adapt to the way they're playing. So, but who's Belgium playing next? There was another game yesterday.
Belgium will next take on Brazil, who beat Mexico 2-0. A goal from Neymar and a last-minute goal from Firmino. It wasn't the most spectacular of games, I must admit. I'm expecting so much more from this Brazilian side, but I think maybe it's my fault. I do look back and look at this Brazil side from the 90s with Bebeto, Romario playing scintillating football. Do you remember the celebration? Or even this Brazilian side from the 70s. But I think football has changed, and Brazil, this Brazilian team has changed as well. They're tougher in defence, which is a good thing for La Seleção fans. For Belgium? Oh, they'll definitely be tough. In their last 15 matches, they've only conceded 3 goals and remain undefeated. But I think that this game against Belgium should be a good one. 2 heavyweights playing, locking horns for a place in the semi-finals. It will be a superb game. I can feel it. All right. Thank you for that, Andy Rubini. Who will you be supporting, Tessa? I'm not telling you, not on air. Thank you. Also to come for you on Good Morning Europe. In case you missed it, Mark Rutte interrupts Donald Trump on tariffs between the US and the EU. We have to work something out, says the Dutch PM. That after a short break. Welcome back to Good Morning Europe. Now, our next story, a couple of weeks ago, the Dutch Prime Minister, he made headlines for spilling his coffee. But this time, it was his response to Donald Trump that's got people talking. Alex has the story.
I do, Tessa. Trying to clear up a mess in both cases. Mark Rutte, the Dutch PM, this time making headlines in America and back here in Europe for his rather bold approach to dealing with Donald Trump. Let's watch the clip.
The EU, we're going to be meeting with them fairly soon. They want to see if they can work something out. And that'll be good. And if we do work it out, that'll be positive. And if we don't, it'll be positive also, because
no,
we'll just think about those cars that pour in here, and we'll do something, right?
We have to work.
But it'll be positive. But again, Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much for being here.
It's good to be here.
No, Mr. President, that's the line from Mark Rutte. He's obviously talking about EU and the EU-US trade war and the tariffs imposed by America on EU imports of, EU exports of steel and aluminium. Now, The reason this is being such a political issue is, let's just have a look at the numbers and show you why this is so important to both of those countries. This is the amount of money, we're talking nearly 60 billion of goods exported by the United States and over 800,000 jobs in America supported by the Dutch. So obviously, Mark Rutte very clear to make out it's not positive if there is no deal and no resolution to the trade war. But this really got us talking theCUBE. This is the gift Mark Rutte gave to Donald Trump. It is a copy of a letter given by Dutch bankers in 1782 to John Adams, a loan of 5 million guilders to help a young America. Rich in symbolism, no doubt. What are your thoughts? And could we see more of this from these two men in this relationship? Let us know using #theCUBE.
Rich in symbolism indeed. And he said no with a smile. That was a strategy. Thank you, Alex. And thank you for joining us on Good Morning Europe. Do stay with Euronews for all of your top stories. And in the meantime, we'll leave you with today's No Comment from Thailand, where rescuers are trying to lead the children out of the cave.
Thank you. How many of you? 13. Brilliant.